Right, so I thought it'd be useful to film. Wait, I'm slightly distracted because there's two robins trying to feed their babies. I basically got my tackle out, so to speak, out of the shed, and yeah, a couple of baby robins scampered about and flew about, and I brought one out, you'll see on the video, and it's running along through the garden, and the two parents are just picking up insects and grabbing them and chasing it, feeding it. I think there's another one still in the shed. Anyway, right, to get to the point of the video. I thought it's worth, as I've rediscovered fishing very recently after a break of about 25-30 years, I had to relearn quite a lot of stuff, and I thought it's worth pointing out the basic gear you need, basic and affordable fishing tackle you need to start float fishing. So I'm not talking about carp fishing here, or even feeder fishing, which I think will require kind of more advanced tackle and potentially more experience. I'd say if you're starting fishing now, do your first season just float fishing if you're focusing on coarse fishing as opposed to sea fishing. Yeah, so really all you need is a pretty basic setup. So I'm going to go through and show you that and explain roughly what it costs, and also in the description of this video I'll put everything I mention, where you can buy it and roughly what it costs. Just found a baby robin, I think, in the shed when I was getting my fishing tackle out. I have seen robins going in and out, but there's no nest in there weirdly. It's just looking at me like it wants some food. I'm going to put it back where I won't squash it. But yeah, that was a nice surprise. I think it's a robin, yeah. Cute. So arguably the first thing you need for a beginner's float setup is a decent but affordable rod, float fishing rod, often called a match rod. This one is decent size, it's 10 foot, so probably equivalent to your average spinning rod, but not a full sort of 12, 13 foot, more advanced match fishing rod. This one's made by Shakespeare, it's their Omni range. Shakespeare tackle can be really good value, but I've also bought some telescopic rods and their rings have fallen off, so just make sure you read reviews. This has been a really decent rod actually. So a 10 foot float fishing rod or match rod is probably what you'll find if you're searching on Amazon, eBay or Angling Direct. Yeah, another good brand is NGT at the moment. The last 5 years or so they've generally made good value, pretty good quality tackle, and by that I mean rods and like storage. I wouldn't necessarily go near some of their smaller tackle, like the split shot I used in a recent video was terrible. Anyway, yeah, so what you need is a rod. The next thing you need is a good quality but good value reel. This is made by, who is it? Wait, it's their NTR range. Nitro, that's the brand. Actually won this one on an Angling Times competition. It's possibly more of a feeder reel, but it's a nice small size. Basically you want nowadays, basically on Amazon and Temu, places like that, they call them spinning reels. I think it's an Americanization, but essentially they're fixed spool reels. This is another example. You want to go pretty small, like 2,500 size spool or smaller, so that indicates how much line you'll get on the reel and therefore the overall size and weight of the reel. Like a big pit, long distance carp fishing reel will be a 4,000 or 5,000 size, really heavy, balanced with a big rod. For a 10 foot 11-foot match fishing rod, float fishing rod, you want a small reel, small and light. So basically, even Daiwa and Shimano sell good value, cheap reels. Yeah, as I said, Nitro as well. Not sure about NGT reels, but yeah, you want a small fixed spool reel to match your small fishing rod. Then you want fishing line to go onto the reel. So this is pretty good. Actually, it's really, really good. It's been around for decades. Drennan Float Fish. This is their 4.5 pound line. That's probably quite a good size main line, just in case you hook up a bigger bream or even a carp. There's also Leader Maxima Chameleon line, £3 there. This chameleon colour is almost invisible in the water, so that's particularly good for float fishing and you know, fussy fish. So your line on your reel. Then you want the tackle that basically is at the business end of things. So that's essentially float, weight and hooks. Float, weights and hooks. I'd recommend, well, it depends where you're fishing, but the easiest sort of float fishing will be on a still water, so on a lake, pond or reservoir. And for those, you want to be fishing with a waggler float. So a straight, obviously a straight float, with just holes at the bottom to pass the line through. See on my head or my arm there? You can get weighted versions of these. Good ones again are made by Drennan. The weighted ones just mean you can cast them further. So if you're fishing a big lake, cast them further. I would go unweighted, and I'll show you the weights you can add in a moment. And when you're beginning fishing, you don't want to be casting at distance. You want to be much closer in, so you can learn how to strike when you get a bite, and you won't be disappointed. So that's the float. Then you want to tie in a hook right at the end. So I always recommend to start with a size 16, especially if you're fishing sweet corn. It's a good size, but you could try an 18. Size 20 might seem really small and difficult to tie onto the line. These are good, again, Drennan, sweet corn barbless. Always buy barbless hooks. Basically it means you can unhook the fish really easily. Often they'll unhook on your unhooking mat or in the net, and you don't have to worry about using a disgorger and things like that. But yeah, hooks are the next thing. And then finally, essentially on the end tackle, you want split shot. These Dinsmores for that many, which is lots of different sizes, about, I don't know, about £8 on eBay. By the way, hooks for about 10, a few pounds. And floats are about £2 each. Yeah, so what you'll find is on the float, I will grab, pretty much on any float, there'll be some writing that says something like 2 BB or something like that, and that will correspond to the size of the weights here. And that means that 2 BB weights, 2 times BB weights, will take the float to the right level floating in the water. So it will just leave a bit of the red floating above the surface. If you put less on, the float will lie on the surface. If you put too many weights on, it will sink underneath and you won't have any idea whether you've got a bite or not. That's all the, I guess what you call the terminal tackle for float fishing. So we've got the rod covered, the reel, float, weights and hook. So 5 key things for essentially the tackle you'll be holding while you're fishing. And then there's a few other bits of gear and kit I'm going to show you that are also essentials. So at some point while fishing, you definitely will, but not necessarily on your first trip, you'll catch a fish that is big enough that means you need to use a landing net to safely bring it in. So if you catch little fish like small roach, minnows, gudgeon, you can just swing them in. unhook them essentially on your lap and put them back in the water. However, anything bigger than I guess, I don't know, 10 centimeters, a few ounces in weight, to save any damage to the fish's mouth and actually the risk of losing the fish, you want to use a landing net. So here is a landing net. This is kind of big enough to get like a 3 or 4 pound bream in, 5 or 6 pound carp. This landing net, yeah, cost about 8 to 10 pounds. It's good quality, made by MAP. And then the landing net handle, this is made by NGT. This is a really long telescopic one. I only use sort of 2/3 of it, but it goes up to 3 meters long. And that just screws in to a standard fitting on the landing net. So then you can land your fish. However, what you don't want to do is then bring your fish onto some rough ground or even grass, because there might be things on the ground that damage the fish. So what you need is a unhooking mat. This is again made by kind of NGT or kind of their other brand. Very cheap, about £5. It's thin, so I wouldn't recommend using it for like a big carp or something like that. You'd get a different sort of unhooking mat for big fish fishing when you start targeting those. But that's great. You put that on the ground and you bring the landing net over when you catch and drop the fish down gently onto the unhooking mat and unhook it. So on that note of unhooking, there's a couple of other things I need to show you. Yeah, so 2 other handy things to have is when you're setting up your float and hook and so on, as you're tying things on, well, mostly the hook, you'll have some spare line. So always have scissors with you. And when you're unhooking smaller fish or just wiping your hands, have a bait towel. Are they called bait towels? Well, anyway, a small fishing towel that can stay in your tackle box for years and get really stinky. And that's just good because as you're hooking things, maggots or corn, and throwing in loose feed, you're going to get really sticky, smelly hands. So also when you unhook fish, you're going to have fishy hands. So that's useful. Another handy thing is to have a disgorger. So look those up. They cost about £1, if that. And if a fish swallows a hook a little bit deeper into its mouth, it can be difficult even with a barbless hook to get it out with your finger, because then, especially small fish, their mouths can be really small. So you use a disgorger to get that out. Yeah, I think that covers pretty much everything. So the last thing is, I've covered everything you need while you're fishing. So the rod, reel, all the terminal tackle and floats and things like that, and all the things you need to land the fish safely. But how do you actually transport your gear down to the lake or the river you're fishing? I mean, when I first restarted fishing, I just shoved it all in a rucksack, and you can do that. But there are rucksacks that fishing companies make. Again, this is by NGT. It's a decent size. Get kind of bait in there, huge tackle box in there, water, lunch, things like that, and other tackle around the edges. I think NGT sell that for about 25 or 30 quid. Really good value, so worth looking at all their luggage. The other thing is a tackle box itself. It's a plastic tackle box. This is a bit more of a fancy one, not necessarily a beginner's one. It's made by Nash. NGT and other budget brands make really good tackle boxes. It's basically somewhere to keep all your bits of, like, all your floats, weights, things like that in, and your hooks and so on. You don't need necessarily anything that big. This cup would cover kind of enough storage for a load of carp gear and coarse float fishing gear. And then lastly, you don't necessarily need a rod holdall, because you've got just the one rod and reel. So you can buy like Velcro bands, rod bands, to wrap around the ends of these, and then you can just transport it in your hand essentially, or on your bike. Or you can spend a bit more money, 30 quid plus, and get a small rod holdall like this one by Drennan Specialist. or yeah, companies sell all sorts of rod holders. Look up compact rod holder and you'll find NGT, Daiwa, other people will sell really good value rod holders. But I'd say if you're just going out with one rod, I would just take the Rucksack and the rod, and then just wrap everything else up, like the net and the unhooking mat, and just shove it into the rucksack. So I hope that's been useful for yeah, beginner's guide to float fishing gear, float fishing tackle. Yeah, good luck. Let me know if it is your first time fishing. Let me know how it goes. I'd be really interested to know. And please do subscribe to this channel. Cheers. Bye.